The first time I realized something was wrong, I was standing in the hallway of my mother's apartment building with a grocery sack of orange tulips and a carton of chicken noodle soup from Central Market. The air smelled like pine sol and someone's burnt toast. Mom's door, 2B, had a new wreath on it, plastic eucalyptus with a plywood script that read, "Gather," and I knew right away she didn't buy it. She doesn't do wreaths. She used to tape a paper snowflake in December and call it festive. I fit the key in the deadbolt, and the door caught on something heavy on the floor. When it opened, I had to shoulder past a tower of neatly labeled plastic bins. Seasonal decor, craft supplies, camping. I looked at the labels, then at the unfamiliar shape of my mother's living room. Her recliner, the oatmeal-colored one I bought after Dad died, had been pushed toward the window. Where her bookshelf used to be was a metal garment rack crowded with coats that weren't hers, down puffers in colors she'd never wear, a men's Carhartt jacket, a kid's glittery parka still with a price code tag. A folded playpen leaned against the TV stand. The smell of pine sol was stronger inside, cutting through the usual old book comfort that clung to Mom's apartment, that smell like a church library and orange peels. "Mom?" I set the tulips on the counter and took in the kitchen. Her tidy stack of bowls had been migrated to the bottom shelf. The top shelves were crammed with family-sized cereal, the kind with cartoon tigers and marshmallow stars. The fridge door was wallpapered with watercolor scribbles under magnets shaped like tacos and cacti. The magnets were cute, I guess, if they'd belonged to us. "In here," she called, and I found her on her knees in the neighbor's doorway. No, technically in her own doorway, but sweeping up the neighbor's Cheerios and dog hair that had drifted through the open threshold, as if the two apartments were one. The neighbor, a woman in a faded college hoodie, lounged with a laptop at their dining table, bare feet up on a chair. Past her, a man I'd never met was balancing a baby on his hip, while a toddler popped in and out of a cardboard fort built across what used to be the shared landing. A folding table straddled the hall, half in front of Mom's door, with a slow cooker humming next to a block of knives. A handwritten sign taped to the wall read, "Please shift stroller to side, fire code." "Hi," the woman said brightly without getting up. "You must be Rebecca. Your mom is the sweetest. She watches Rachel while I do my remote meetings. It takes a village, right?" Mom stood up, dusted off her knees, and managed a tilted smile. "Ash and Kyle," she said, "from 2C. They moved in around Easter." "Moved in around the week your back went out," I said, too softly for anyone but Mom to hear. When I hugged her, she felt lighter. Her sweater smelled like lemon cleaner. The baby, Rachel, was gummy and adorable, and none of this was adorable. I want to make one thing clear. My mother is the kind of woman strangers relax around. She has the face of a former elementary school teacher, gentle eyes, a stern mouth that softens when it's time for cookies. And she lost my father, Ed, after 37 years of marriage. He made breakfast every morning and knew where every important piece of paper lived. When he died, gray winter light hanging over Dallas like a threadbare blanket, Mom's loneliness settled the way dust does. Inexorable, quiet, invisible until you walked through it and your hands came away coated. I called and visited, but grief is a private continent. She moved into Rosewood Flats because the leasing manager told her they hosted bingo on Wednesdays, and because she liked the magnolia tree by the mailboxes. I checked the locks. I made sure her Ring doorbell worked. I set her up on the Nextdoor app so she could scroll and cluck and feel connected. I did not plan for a couple in 2C to annex her life one plastic bin at a time. "What's with the bins?" I asked it, gesturing as pleasantly as I could. "Oh, those?" Ash waved her hand like she was batting away a gnat. "We're reworking storage. Our place is a studio, technically, even though it's called a one-bedroom, and your mom said we could keep a few things here for the weekend. She's a lifesaver." And Mom's eyes flicked to mine, apology swimming somewhere behind the irises. "It's temporary," she whispered. "They're young. It's hard with babies." The three of them talked at me, a chorus of generational arrangements and, "Hey, it's the economy," and borrowed sugar karmas. That week's grocery run stretched into a second one I paid for. I found a list on Mom's counter written in Ash's bubble letters. Method lavender, OxyClean, Uncrustables, oat milk, no pulp. Next to it was Mom's list, small and neat. Brown rice, tea, grapefruits. Her handwriting looked like the patient notes of a nurse. The next time I came by, Mom's parking spot had a double stroller parked in it, like a ship was docked there. The landlord's tacky fake French office chair sat in her living room. They were tossing it, Mom said, and the coat rack sported a municipal rainbow of coats and hoodies. The neighbor's dog, a doodle of indeterminate morality, had learned to wander in and out of Mom's place for treats that were not dog treats but became dog treats when the toddler offered fistfuls from Mom's delicate porcelain candy dish. The dog's name was Captain. He wore a bandana in a new color every week. Captain barked at me like I was the intruder. It gathered slowly, like a time lapse of moss, how completely they had colonized Mom's space. It wasn't just their stuff. It was the way Ash said, "Could you run a load while I'm on this call?" and handed Mom a hamper without waiting for an answer. It was Kyle storing their Costco flats of LaCroix in Mom's pantry and explaining it was better for everyone because the hallway was safety challenged. It was the stroller blockade that expanded until Mom had to sideways slip to reach her mail. It was the copy of the key that I hadn't realized they had until I showed up unexpectedly one morning with kolaches and found Kyle's sister asleep on Mom's sofa under Mom's quilt, mascara and black half-moons under her eyes. When I pulled Mom onto the balcony, the magnolia leaves whispered and a heat shimmer rose from the pool. It was mid-July. Somewhere a leaf blower started up a feudal war with the Texas dust. "You have to set a boundary," I said. "This is more than borrowing sugar. This is your home." She looked out over the parking lot where her Corolla sat like a dutiful friend. "They're good people," she said faintly. "They said their families are far away. When your dad was alive, this whole place felt bigger. Now, if I shut the door, the rooms feel like they echo." She smiled a brittle smile and added, "Besides, when Rachel naps on my couch, she makes these little snore peeps like a kitten. It's sweet, Becca. I like helping." I nodded. I understood. Loneliness is a cobweb. It feels like silk at first. But I set my own jaw. "Okay," I said. "We're helping with our eyes open." That weekend, I bought a large notebook with a blue cover and wrote on the inside, "Neighbor encroachment, observations." I took photos of strollers and wreaths and bins, of the way tape crosses a threshold and moves the line we think is our own. I logged dates, July 12th, baby monitor installed in Mom's bedroom, just for a nap. July 18th, Kyle borrows Mom's vacuum and returns it clogged with confetti. July 20th, silverware missing, finds its way back after I ask. I recorded the way Mom's voice changed, light when they were around, then small when they left, like a stage after everyone has gone home. I am not a vengeful person. I'm an accountant. My version of revenge is accuracy sharpened into a spear. But this story, this neighbor revenge story I never asked to live in, began with that notebook. It began with me standing in my mother's kitchen, holding a stack of paper plates that weren't ours, listening to a slow cooker in the hallway bubble, like a fuse going. It began with me realizing that the cruelest theft isn't the space you can measure in square feet. It's the kind that takes up the corners of a person's heart and convinces them they like the furniture. If you've never encountered the HOA subset of humanity in its natural habitat, imagine a Shakespearean court dressed in cargo shorts and branded polo shirts, where grudges are laminated and rules are written in 10-point font no one reads until they can weaponize them. Rosewood Flats didn't have an HOA, technically. It had a community council consisting of a property manager, 2 long-timers with too much time, and one guy whose primary personality was owns a drone. That guy, Matt, filmed the 4th of July pool party and posted a slow-motion montage set to a royalty-free rock track that made everyone look like they were starring in a beer commercial. I am telling you this because the day I decided to escalate, I knew exactly which egos to feed and which rules to show them they'd been neglecting. First, I went quiet. I brought kolaches. I smiled at Captain. I praised Rachel's motor skills. I let a week pass where I was simply present around Mom, then present around the neighbors, then present with my blue-covered notebook in my tote like a secret. People confess things when they think you are on their team. On Thursday, Kyle told me he'd talked the leasing office into ignoring the second car in Mom's spot because she doesn't really use it anyway. On Friday, Ash confessed they used Mom's address for a daycare waitlist because their studio's square footage technically disqualified them, and the daycare director loved grandparents. On Saturday, I found their beach chairs across Mom's balcony, their popsicle sticks in Mom's potted basil, their overflowing trash in the chute by Mom's door. I photographed everything I could without being weird. The thing about documenting a violation is that you have to care more about getting it right than getting it fast. I cared. Then I sent 2 emails. The first was to the property manager, subject line, Safety and fire code concerns, shared hallway blockage near 2B2C. And I attached 4 photos and cited the relevant section of the Dallas Fire Code about egress obstructions and combustible appliances in hallways. Thank you, Google, and thank you the 4 days I spent reading municipal websites while eating Aldi hummus. I used phrases like liability exposure and burn hazard. I was polite and relentless, like water burrowing through stone. I copied Matt the drone guy and the council's general email because I love an audience when safety is involved. The second email was to Adult Protective Services, not as an accusation, but as a question born of responsibility. Can you advise at what point helping a lonely senior becomes undue influence or exploitation? I included no names, only scenarios, a neighbor with a key, personal space used as storage, caregiving duties assumed without pay or contract. The APS auto reply said someone would call. They did. Do you feel your mother is in danger? The caseworker asked when we spoke. Her voice was practiced warm, like a social worker's blanket. No, I said honestly, not danger like that, but she's being overrun. I explained the loneliness, the baby, the bins, the charm offensive that felt like a takeover. The caseworker explained what undue influence meant legally, which was complicated and often reserved for wills and financial abuse. And then she said something that shifted the air in my chest. Sometimes, she said, the best thing we do is help the elder find her no again. We can connect her with a senior center, a grief group, a volunteer gig. Space expands when a person remembers their own shape. I made a list. Senior Center on Mockingbird. Church Grief Group at St. James. The Library Book Club, second Tuesdays. I started small. I invited Mom on a field trip to the bookshop cafe that still had a chalkboard menu and a bell that jingled on the door. We lingered with paperbacks and split a blueberry muffin. At home that night, I put a flyer on her fridge for the senior watercolor class. I used to paint fir trees, she said helpfully, as if I didn't know the attic held 3 of them. The property manager wrote back Monday at 8:11 a.m., spurred by the words fire code and perhaps the knowledge that Matt the drone guy would sniff a story. We'll do a hallway sweep this afternoon, he wrote. All personal items must be removed from common areas. That evening when I arrived, the slow cooker table was gone. The stroller had been dragged into 2C where it leaned like a sulking teenager. The bins had consolidated into a wall right inside Mom's door. They're on to us, Kyle grinned, as if we were conspirators. You know how management is. I do, I said, and I smiled. I am good at smiling. For the next cul-de-sac of days, everything shifted in small ways that only someone paying attention could chart. The baby monitor disappeared from Mom's bedroom. The bins, fewer now, remained by the bookshelf, half open like mouths that had been told to chew with lips closed. Ash started asking more instead of assuming. It felt rehearsed, like someone had coached her. Could Rachel nap here while I run to HEB? She'd say. And sometimes Mom would say no because we had lunch plans or my watercolor class, which rolled off her tongue with a cred she had earned by actually going. I printed a calendar. We filled it with boxes. Bingo, book club, call Rebecca. It wasn't much, but it was something like a life. On a Tuesday afternoon, I showed up with a collapsible shelving unit I bought at Target. Humor me, I told Mom. We assembled it by the front door and filled it with Mom's things. Her umbrella with the wooden handle, her sun hat, her grocery tote with the bluebonnets on it, a pair of gardening gloves for the community beds out back. Then I wrote a polite sign and taped it above the shelf. Martha's entry shelf. Please do not store items here. Thanks. It was all that stood between Mom's home and the encroaching tide, but it felt like a seawall. The next weekend, Ash knocked on Mom's door and found it locked. Not just latched, but double locked. We had rekeyed the deadbolt. Her eyebrows went up. Her smile did not reach her eyes. Oh, she said. I didn't realize you were napping. I was just going to put these bins in the corner for a minute. We're tidying today, Mom said. She stood with her shoulders straighter than I'd seen them in weeks. And I've got the book club at 3. She sounded like a person with appointments. Kyle leaned in behind Ash. He had the flustered look of someone whose shortcut is closing. This is awkward, he said. We just thought. You thought the hall was a mudroom, and my mother was a free maid. My voice came out not as a shout, but as a truth-wearing boots. I didn't plan to say it that way. It arrived in my mouth fully formed, like a verdict. It stops now. We've helped her too, Ash said quickly, defensively. We bring her leftovers. She's not your pantry, I said. Mom put a hand on my elbow. Rebecca, she said, an appeal and a gratitude in 2 syllables. Then she turned to them. I liked having Rachel over, she said gently, and sometimes I will again when I invite her. But my apartment is my apartment. If you want to visit, knock. If you want to leave things, don't. The silence yawned, awkward and real. The kind where everyone learns if they can live with a boundary. Somewhere down the hall, Captain barked because someone was holding a pizza box and Captain believed in miracles. For a week, there was peace, no bins. Occasional small requests that were easy to decline, easier to accept on Mom's terms. Then on Friday at 7 a.m., I got a text from Mom. They have moved back into the hallway. I drove faster than I should have, coffee sloshing. The stroller, once more, had laid siege to her door. A twin mattress leaned against the wall like a pressed flower. A cardboard wardrobe box dwarfed her umbrella shelf. A post-it note on Mom's door read, "Back later, use key," in Ash's careful loops. I don't have their baby today, Mom said, hurt settling in the corners of her mouth. I know, I said. And I did know. Bullies don't always look like bullies. Sometimes they look like people who have learned, over years, that others will make room. That afternoon, I filed a formal complaint. I attached the photos. I CC'd the regional property manager, the city non-emergency line, and, because neighbor revenge can be a campaign when it must, I posted a tactful fact-only note on the Nextdoor app about fire code reminders at Rosewood Flats. The drone guy commented with a slow-mo video of past hallway blockages set to a dramatic orchestral hit. The retired nurse from 1A chimed in about tripping hazards. The landlord, suddenly very awake to his liability exposure, posted that any items found in common areas after 5 p.m. Friday would be discarded. It was not elegant. It was not a miracle. It was a policy. At 5:15, I heard the rumble of a maintenance cart. I heard voices, the resigned tone of people who know they've been called on their nonsense. By 5:30, the hallway was empty. I breathed, really breathed, like it was the first time in a month I had full lungs. Mom's face loosened into something I hadn't seen in too long. Relief looks like youth if you squint. And still, there was the matter of the key. When you grow up in Texas, you learn 3 things early. Never underestimate a summer storm, never accept only one quote from a mechanic, and never bet against a church lady with a clipboard. I didn't have the clipboard, but I had the energy. I also had a friend named Dana who worked as an assistant manager at a different apartment complex and knew the property world's secret handshake. If they have a copied key, the only fix is a rekey, she said. At the complex level, not just your mom's deadbolt. Management won't want to pay unless there's a paper trail. Give them a paper trail a mile long. So I made one. I printed every email. I collated every photo with dates, times, notes. I collected statements from neighbors willing to sign their names to the frustration. The nurse from 1A, Mr. Patel from 3D, who had watched Kyle practice skateboard tricks in the hallway at 11 p.m. Even Matt the drone guy, who provided a still from his 4th of July reel where you could clearly see a stroller wedged in front of Mom's door like a defiant art installation. I wrote a cover letter that would have made my high school English teacher cry from pride, full of phrases like pattern of boundary violations and tenant quiet enjoyment. I scheduled a meeting. The property manager, young, exhausted, wearing a polo with a Rosewood Flats logo and the haunted look of someone who broke up a pool fight once, tried to placate me with promises of friendly reminders. I slid the stack across his desk. This is no longer friendly, I said. This is about safety and exploitation. Rekey the building. Put it in the newsletter. Charge what you need to charge. I'll pay my mother's portion. I leaned in. If you don't, and something happens, the liability is yours. He swallowed. He had a framed quote behind him that said, "Great days at Rosewood start with us," as if exclamation points could will it so. "We'll review," he said weakly. "While you review," I said, "we're changing Mom's locks." I had already hired a locksmith, scheduled for Saturday morning. The locksmith, a compact guy with 4 arms like Greek columns, showed up with a satchel of mechanical magic and 3 polished brass keys. He tested the lock, then tested it again. "Only you and management have these now," he said. "Anyone else's key won't work." His voice had the reassuring music of competence. Perhaps you're wondering if I confronted Ash and Kyle directly about the key. I did. Ash appeared at Mom's door an hour after the locksmith left, performing surprise like a stage role. "We were going to bake banana bread," she said brightly, and her hand hovered over the doorknob like a muscle memory. The knob didn't turn. Her smile faltered. She looked at me. "We've really miscommunicated, huh?" "We did," I said, "in that you communicated something, and I heard the opposite." I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "You've taken advantage of my mother's kindness. You've used her address, her space, her time. That ends now. If you knock, she may answer. If you need something, you can ask. But the automatic access, that's over." Kyle appeared behind her. He had the defensive posture of someone whose bar tab had just been cut off. "We never meant harm," he said. "We're just drowning. It's expensive. It's—" "I know," I said, and I meant it. I'm not made of stone. I know the economy. I know daycare waitlists and rents that make your heart stutter. But you cross lines? You don't get to fix drowning by standing on someone else's head. The theatrical part of me wanted a scene. Voices rising, neighbors peeking through peepholes, the kind of next-door fodder people feast on. But sometimes the most satisfying flavor of neighbor revenge is anticlimax, a boundary that simply refuses to budge. We stared at one another in the hallway, a social geometry problem. Then Ash nodded, a tiny tilt that might have been understanding or might have been calculation for next time. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay." "Good," I said. "We'll be cordial neighbors." In the weeks that followed, the air changed. It wasn't dramatic. There was no thunderclap, but Mom's apartment exhaled and became hers. The garment rack disappeared, the bins were gone, the fridge held her tea and leftovers, not family-sized cereal that went stale. She hung a watercolor fir tree in the hallway, her signature in the corner, like a small flag. She went to watercolor class every Thursday. She met a woman named Lorraine who had the kind of frank kindness only found in people who've surrendered their illusions and decided to be excellent anyway. They started walking in the mornings before the heat pressed down like a wet hand. On Nextdoor, my post about fire codes had morphed into a broader conversation about community norms. People argued, as they do, about whether leaving shoes in the hall was tyranny sparking or harmless. A few folks messaged me privately to say they'd seen the way 2C had treated Mom and had been uncomfortable. "Didn't know how to say anything," one wrote. "Thanks for stepping in." It felt good and also irritating. Where were they when it mattered? But that's the thing about communities. They're full of weak links that become strong only when strengthened by example. If that sounds like a canned moral, it isn't. It's a ledger balance. My revenge had never been about humiliating Ash and Kyle. It had been about returning a woman's home to her and making the cost of future nonsense high enough that the nonsense could not afford it. I wish I could tell you the story ends here, neat as a receipt. It doesn't. One Thursday, as I pulled into the lot, I saw Kyle arguing with the property manager by the office, waving his arms. I parked and listened, not hiding, not intruding, simply available to be witnessed if things went sideways. "You don't get to accuse us of exploitation," Kyle said. "We were building community. Isn't that what you all always say?" "Community isn't a free storage unit," the manager said, surprisingly firm, "and it's not unpaid labor." Ash stood a few feet away, bouncing Rachel on her hip. She glanced at me and then away. On impulse, one of those uncharacteristic bends in the road you take because you're tired of the same scenery, I walked over. "Look," I said, "there's a world where this all could have been different. If you'd asked at the start, if you'd checked your sense of entitlement, if you'd brought casseroles instead of bringing a mattress, if you'd seen my mom as a person, not an amenity." I nodded at Rachel, who had a single curl stuck to her forehead with drool. "She's cute, it's hard, but you don't get to fix hard by making it someone else's problem." Something in Ash's expression softened for a flicker, then set again, the way a pond ripples then goes smooth. "We're moving," she said. "Next month. It's too expensive here anyway." She said it like a victory and a loss. I said, "I hope you find a place you love. I hope, when you do, you think about how you arrive." It's possible to read this as me taking the high road, and I did, partly because I'm better at spreadsheets than screaming, and partly because the revenge had already happened. The revenge was the locks changed, the hallway cleared, the newsletter warning bolded and underlined, the neighbors who had learned the words quiet enjoyment. The revenge was Mom's watercolor class and the way her laugh came out easier, like a cork unlodged. One evening, long after the bins were gone, Mom and I sat on her balcony with iced tea sweating into coasters. The sky over Dallas turned that romantic bruised purple it does before the street lamps flicker awake. She looked at me and said, "I didn't realize how small my world had gotten. I thought the baby made it bigger, but really, I was shrinking to fit theirs." "You opened your door because you're kind," I said. "They took advantage because they're used to open doors. Kindness without boundaries is just a hallway." She laughed, then grew serious. "Do you think I'm foolish?" "I think you're human," I said. "And I think Dad would be proud you're painting again." She nodded, eyes glimmering. He liked the fir trees. We sat a long time with the magnolia leaves whispering, and Captain barking somewhere like he'd seen a squirrel shaped like a miracle. The heat broke, and a small wind moved the chimes. In that easy quiet, I realized a thing I'd been skirting. The revenge story here wasn't only for my mother, it was for me, too. I had carried the adult child's cocktail of grief and duty and fury, and putting the bins out, putting the boundary up, was also me telling the world I would not let it rewrite our family in lowercase. The day Ash and Kyle moved out of 2C, the hallway filled with cardboard again, but this time it was the righteous kind, taped shut, labeled with their own names, stacked briefly, then ferried out to a U-Haul with the grim efficiency of people who've learned the cost of overstaying. I brought Mom a cinnamon roll to celebrate. She tore it in half and insisted I take the larger piece. We watched through the peephole as the last garment bag disappeared. The door of 2C closed with a final click. The building seemed to breathe. You would think that's the end, but stories like this ripple. A week later, a notice appeared on the Rosewood Flats bulletin board, next to the Lost Cat posters and the Zumba class flyer. Community Care Program, volunteers needed. It was a project the property manager launched after recent community conversations. The idea was simple and, frankly, brilliant. A roster of residents willing to help with defined tasks, ride to a doctor appointment, grab a few groceries, water plants, scheduled and tracked so no one person got run over, and kindness didn't morph into a free-for-all. There was even a small stipend fund for people on fixed incomes who took on tasks, funded by a modest rent bump on market-rate units and a couple of donations from tenants who liked the PR of doing good. Neighbors signed up. A spreadsheet was born. I cried when I saw the template. Task, date, helper, boundaries, notes. Revenge can harden you. It can also organize you. Mom signed up to be helped exactly twice a month. Once for heavy grocery bags and once for a ride to a Saturday art market. She also signed up to help on Tuesdays in the community garden. The retired nurse from 1A taught her to prune tomatoes. Lorraine brought her a trowel printed with tiny sunflowers. The drone guy filmed a peaceful Muzik Under promotional video that actually made me a little verklempt, and for once, I didn't hate it. He slow-moed a watering can like it was an Oscar winner. One late afternoon, when the sky was the naive blue of elementary school construction paper, I found Mom filling a clear bag with clothes for donation. "Too many sweaters," she said. "I don't need them. I want to keep space for new things." She held up a cardigan the color of wet sand. "Do you want it?" "I'm not a cardigan person," I said. "You're a boundaries person," she said, deadpan. And we both laughed until we cried because memory is a sweet bruise and we were pressing it, but this time it didn't hurt. On the table was the blue-covered notebook. I flipped through it, those pages of dates and photos and a kind of righteous heat. I had planned to keep it like a trophy. Instead, I tore out the last few blank pages and wrote a different title on the inside cover, Martha's Plans. We listed things you can do with a home that belongs to you and no one else. Host Lorraine for tea, join the library's memoir writing class, bake a pie for the community care potluck, learn to use the apartment gym without fear of gawkers, plant basil, hang art, say no, say yes. We wrote, call Rebecca anytime, and laughed because my number was already everywhere like a persistent weed. People want a cinematic finishing move in a neighbor revenge story. Eggs on a windshield, a social media expose, a courtroom scene with triumphant music swelling. I won't lie, I imagine those sometimes, back when the bins felt like a siege engine and the stroller felt like a battering ram. But what we chose was more American in the best way, and more my mother. We used rules and compassion, process and public shaming where necessary, to push a problem back into shape. We built a tiny system that prevented it from simply reanimating with a new face. We did not torch the village to save it. We taught the village to stop building bonfires in hallways. Months later, on a Saturday that smelled like fresh asphalt and kettle corn, the farmer's market again, I ran into Ash at a park across town. Rachel was bigger, all elbows and independence. She ran toward a fountain and back like a wind-up bird. Ash looked older in the truthful way parenting makes you, etched and luminous. She saw me, flinched, then walked over. "I owe you an apology," she said without preamble. "I've been thinking about it. We took advantage of your mom. It was wrong." I told myself a story about community to make it feel noble. It wasn't. I waited a beat. People think forgiveness is a reflex. It isn't. It's a decision you make when the truth has been said out loud at least once. "Thank you," I said. "We're okay." She nodded. "We're doing better," she said, gesturing to the park, the hand-me-down stroller that was smaller and folded when not in use. Learned a little humility. I joined a mutual aid group. It turns out you can ask for help without squatting in someone's life. She smiled, and it was weary and real. "Is your mom painting?" "Fir trees," I said. "All the fir trees." We stood in the easy silence of people who have lived through a small war and would rather not reenact it. Then Rachel shouted, "Mama!" in the singular voice of children everywhere, and Ash went. I watched them go and felt the ledger in my chest balance. The revenge was complete and, more importantly, it had turned into something else. An adjustment to everyone's orbit so we stopped colliding. That night, I ate dinner with Mom at her small maple table. Spaghetti with marinara from a jar, and a salad of cherry tomatoes she'd learned to grow without killing. We lit a candle because it's what she does to make any meal a moment. After, we took our bowls to the sink. The counters were clear. The garment rack existed only as a memory that made us raise our eyebrows when we remembered it. The door was locked in a way that kept the world exactly as far as she wanted it. "Do you remember the sign you made?" she asked suddenly, smiling. "Martha's entry shelf? Please do not store items here. I should embroider it." "I'll frame it," I said. "Gallery show. Boundaries." She grinned. "Neighbors would come. They'd bring casseroles this time," I said. We laughed. The good kind. The kind that doesn't need to be loud to be whole. After I left, I sat in my car a minute, hands on the steering wheel, listening to the cicadas insist the night was theirs. I thought about all the ways this could have gone. I thought about the version of me that would have relished ruin, about the version that would have swallowed anger like a coin and called it virtue. I thought about Dad and his breakfasts, and the way he never slammed a cabinet in his life. I chose the version we lived, resistance shaped like a door that locks, kindness shaped like a calendar square, neighbor revenge that doesn't end with a mugshot, but with a watercolor hung straight on a wall no one else claims. If you need a neat epilogue, here it is. In the spring, the property newsletter ran a feature titled, "A Home is a Home." It included a photo of Mom's watercolor fir trees, printed with her permission, and a little write-up about the community care program and how we help without taking over. I clipped it and taped it into the blue notebook under Martha's plans. I wrote one more list. Things we kept. Her chair, her shelves, her keys, her laugh, her no, her yes. And next to it, like a whisper we would keep repeating until it was muscle memory, neighbor revenge isn't about their humiliation. It's about our restoration. It's about making a life impossible to annex. It's about a door that is yours and a knock you can answer or not, and the knowledge that you get to decide.